Hello, everybody. Welcome to Take the Black Live, the one and only show on the internet where we go over all things
Ooh.
sci-fi, fantasy, movies, TV, dragons, swords, space lasers, which is this every week. I'm Dan Selcke. That's Daniel Roman, and we're going to have a civil discussion about all those things I just mentioned. Thanks for joining us today. Hi, Julie. Hey, Martha. Good to see you here. Can't wait to share our thoughts and opinions with you. Daniel, what are we talking about today?
Wow, this is so nice. This is like the ASMR episode of Take the Black. I'm all here for it. I didn't bring anything to click on a microphone, but I am excited that we have stuff to talk about. Hi there in the chat. Martha, hey Julie. Good to see all you guys. I'm gonna stop talking quietly because for some reason it's taking more energy to do that than to just talk normally. Yeah, no, we have a good show for you guys today. We've got Westeros stuff to talk about as always. We've got Middle Earth stuff to talk about that is wild and ridiculous, and you have to hear it to believe it. And even then, you probably won't believe it. We have a
Probably shouldn't.
controversy to get into. Probably shouldn't. And yeah, talk about what we've been watching, what we've been reading, all the latest and greatest. Dan, how are you doing today? You ready to get right into it?
I am. Let's begin. And yeah, we do have there is some controversy in the world of fantasy and science fiction books. What does that look like? Stay tuned.
Yes.
But first, let's hit up
Yes.
some Western stuff. Hello, Nicole. Good to see you. Um, so as always, there's updates flowing in about House of the Dragon and Game of Thrones. We have a new report about the release date for House of Dragon season two. They keep kind of
Yes.
changing it, or rather, just random people keep saying things that we keep reporting it every time as if it's the official one. The newest one, which does come from a pretty
Yeah,
good
that.
source, HBO CEO Casey Bloys, very high up, doesn't get higher than that, except for Zaslav,
Hmm.
said, I think it might have been during an award show, that it's going to come in early summer. House of the Dragon season two,
Yes.
early summer from the CEO. Matt Smith said August, but what does Matt Smith know? He's an actor. HBO CEO Casey Bloys, highly positioned. He's up there. So I'm going to take his word, hopefully June or July. Yippee-ki-yay.
Yeah, and this kind of lines up with some rumblings that I want to say Variety had reported on that they heard early summer was what HBO was shooting for. So, yeah, so this is contradicting what Matt Smith said, which was August. But again, like you said, we're gonna trust the he's the CEO now. He used to be the programming president. He's the honcho at HBO. So obviously, if he's saying early summer, we're gonna listen. So
Yippee-ki-yay.
that's the news with House of the Dragon. We could be watching it in June or July, which is exciting.
It is good.
But it is good. It's also far from the only Westeros stuff we have to talk about today because Mr. Blois was feeling benevolent. He felt like giving us lots of things to get excited about. He also mentioned the other Game of Thrones spinoff, A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms, The Hedge Knight. And basically said which is based on Dunk and Egg. If you don't know, they're making a Dunk and Egg show. Obviously, you know. Otherwise, how did you get here? Um, that is still slated to start filming later this year, according to Ploys. So what do you think, Dan? Are we expecting that in 2025?
Yeah, I think that's what they're aiming for. This kind of smaller scale Game of Thrones spin-off series about a knight and a squire wandering the earth, solving problems. I mean, I'm looking forward to it. I think it seems pretty obvious, right? They're aiming for like a House of the Dragon one year, Another the Seven Kingdoms the next year, and then switch back and forth kind of
Sure.
plan. I get it. It's smart. I I'll just repeat my fear. I just hope they're not jumping the gun on the House of the on Another the Seven Kingdoms. It does seem awfully quick. I assumed this would take longer to develop, but if they do a great job, I'll be happy. If 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 modern TV studios no longer have the ability to produce one season of a hot show per year, given that TV shows on this level are basically like movies now. Okay, maybe a
Hmm.
solution is to make two shows, have them concurrent, and have one per year. At least it's not four Star Wars shows per year. At least it's not three Marvel shows per year. Um, It's acceptable,
Yes.
but you watch yourself, McCoy.
Yeah, I think I'm cautiously optimistic because it is Night of the Seven Kingdoms. That is a slightly, it's a more contained story. It's not like they're trying to launch two Game of Thrones sized things at the same time, hopefully, in theory. Whenever I think of a Night of the Seven Kingdoms as a TV show, I kind of picture it more as like almost like self-contained miniseries because that's what
Hmm.
the stories are. They're each a little self-contained novella. Dunk and Egg go on, I don't want to say an adventure. Typically, they get embroiled in backstabbing politics because it's Game of Thrones. Um, but yeah, I could get behind the one every other year. I'm not too nervous that they're diving right in, and maybe part of that is because, um, if they waited until House of the Dragon was done to try to do the Hedge Knight, I wonder how much input George R. R. Martin would be able to have. Like, just on these television programs that are going to span like a decade or however long to be produced, it's like I can see why there might be a little bit of a fire because he's an older guy to like be getting them in the pipeline so that they really have him as a resource.
Yeah, I
But
I
yeah,
mean,
so
I guess the counter to that argument is saying that if they waited, he might finish another Duncan Egg novella. But also, you say that you'll be laughed out of the room. So you're probably more on the money.
I think with the Duncan Egg novellas, I know George has said he wants to write a bunch more of them. I'm sure he will
Of
write
course
more
he
of
does.
them. But that's one of those things where I'm not really holding my breath. Like a Dream of Spring's more important than Duncan Egg. Let's be real here. So we'll see. But yeah, so that happened. However, because Casey Bloys heard your personal fears, Dan, about their Game of Thrones cinematic universe, he wants you to know that they're not developing any other spin-offs right now. Or they have them in development, but they're not actively working on making others. So
Sure.
he said, this is a quote from him, I think with a show like Game of Thrones, when somebody reads that something is in development, there becomes an expectation that that is being shot, which is not the case. So right now, the only two things that are greenlit are House of the Dragon, obviously, and The Hedge Knight. Uh, I just want to note, even Casey Bloys, shortening the title here to The Hedge Knight, the logical choice. There are a lot of other projects in development, but I don't have anything imminent to report. So that includes, obviously, The Jon Snow Show. Not
Uh-huh.
greenlit, not really doing much right now aside from people mulling it. Um, so yeah, that's what's going on with the spinoffs. Does that make you feel any better about all this?
Yeah, of course it does. Again, HBO has a reputation, a long, forged, carefully built reputation on making quality and going slow and steady and not overreaching. But it's a new time. They're owned by Warner Brothers Discovery, who are forging ahead with a lot of stuff. And I don't know. I just have this fear that one day he'll come out and say like, it's time to release the Game of Thrones blockchain TV show or something, because that is what they should be doing under David Zaslav. Not yet. Still classy, but I'm a little nervous. Although the old showrunners of Game of Thrones, David Benioff and Dan Weiss, they had a fun little interview where they talked about the
Yeah.
possibility of returning to the Westeros universe to maybe work with the Jon Snow show, purely for fun, purely speculative, but saying that like maybe when we're 80 and Kit Harington's approaching retirement, he can throw that cloak on again with real gray in his beard for one last ride.
Yeah.
So they could return to do like the Jon Snow as an old man show like 40 years from now, which cool, sure, why not? Now that would be fine.
Yeah, I would be okay with that. I feel like if you're gonna do, a sequel to A Song of Ice and Fire, it's essentially what a Jon Snow show would be. Like, don't rush into it. Take your time. Come back. There's something cool about that, seeing someone come back like years later, where it doesn't
Yeah.
feel something like that doesn't feel quite as much like a we're cashing in on this real quick to try to make a bunch of
Mhm.
stuff. It's like if someone's going to come back when they're that much older, there's got to be some sort of passion behind it. But they also said, I didn't copy the quote into our document here, but they also said that they think it would be better in the shorter term if there was a fresh team working on it rather than
Totally.
them coming back. So they're not really gunning to do the Jon Snow show. But like, would
No.
they do it with Kit Harington? Probably, if
In like
it came
30
down
years,
to
yeah.
it. Yeah.
They gotta, sure, why not?
Uh, Julie asked in the chat, have they done any casting for Dunk and Egg? We don't know. We think they've started because there was a casting announcement that went out, I want to say late last year, that sounded it was from, I believe, the casting company that's doing Dunk and Egg, and it said the roles sounded a lot like Dunk and Egg. So we think they might have started casting it, but they haven't announced anyone yet. So we'll
figure
keep an eye on that.
they would have had to. I mean, if they're going to shoot this year, like in the summer or whatever, they
Yes.
have to be moving along or they're not going to be ready in time. But they're not broadcasting it at any rate, which is different than like that Harry Potter show they're making, which they announced like basically the day after somebody had the idea. They just said they're making it. and only now they're getting around to kind of talking about moving forward with it. That was way, way, way too early. But
it's
I don't know. Again, that's
yeah.
I don't work there.
Yep, it blows my mind with stuff like that because, in my opinion, and like this is something that was in that MCU book that I was reading that was like a MCU The Reign of Marvel Studios. It's a really good like behind the scenes on how Marvel built their kingdom basically. Talked about how one of the issues with this current era of Marvel and Star Wars was that the new CEO of Disney, Bob Chapek, who he was the CEO for a brief period, and then Bob Iger came back because they basically, the board and Iger, they all felt Chapek wasn't doing a great job. One of the ways he didn't do a great job was pressuring Marvel and Lucasfilm to announce a bunch of things that they weren't really ready to announce. And this was, I want to say in like 2020 or 2021. This was the time that Marvel came out and was like, here is phases 4, 5, 6. And these are a bunch of projects that we aren't even remotely going to start developing for like years. Yeah, same with Lucasfilm. So I'm totally with you on the Harry Potter thing, where it's like you guys are really jumping the gun with this. But I also really don't care about the Harry Potter thing anyway. So I don't have a horse in that race aside from to scoff at it.
Maybe we'll do a show one day. We bring out the Harry Potter stuff. What a complicated thicket. But for now, let's move forward with another big show that's coming up this year. I know this year will mark the return of The Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power over on Amazon Prime Video. Now, okay, this show, ancient history. Lord of the Rings, obviously, everybody knows, everybody loves. A whole generation came up on the books. Another one came up on the movies. Like it doesn't really get bigger than this name. Everyone knows the contours. One Ring of Power, hobbitses, dragonses, filthy hobbitses, wizards, all that good stuff. The Rings of Power, the first season came out opposite House of the Dragon in 2021, and it found a audience, but it had some pushback set thousands of years before the Lord of the Rings story we know. It's got some familiar characters, and I enjoyed it more or less, but it did have a bit of a feeling of a kind of marketing pitch in search of a good idea. Like, why does it really exist? What story do you really need to tell with this? I like parts of it. I didn't like other parts of it. I was entertained. I was bored. It was fine. They spent a lot of money on it, and it's coming back.
Yeah.
And Daniel, I understand that 4chan, which is about the most reliable place on the internet that you can possibly seek out. It's it's not as bad as it used to be, but it's a place known for pretty wild rumors. Has
it's still a high
report. Scum and villainy. Well, because 8chan's way worse. But because they're too bad for 4chan. Oh, we don't want to get into it.
What about 12chan? Is 12chan okay?
And don't speak it into existence either. Let's not go there. 4chan's known as a place where people share some pretty crazy stuff. So naturally, we're going to talk about what they're talking about. They shared a whole cache of reports, rumors, wild
Yeah.
speculation about what's coming in the Rings of Power season 2. We are not saying any of these are true, but they're too crazy not to discuss. Before we speak about this, do you want to say anything about the veracity of these rumors? Like, how seriously are we to take
Yeah, I
this?
do. So here's what I would say about these. So these really started gaining a little more traction because the OneRing.net reported on them, and that's
Sure.
a fairly large Lord of
Yeah,
the
they're
Rings
classy.
fan site. And the thing that made me not dismiss all this outright, because some of these are really crazy,
Mhm.
was that the OneRing.net said they had already independently verified around 40% of the claims being made.
Gotcha.
So through their own secret channels, they had already heard some of this stuff. And then there was around half of it that was new to them that blew everyone's minds and their Discord server melted and whatever else. So I mean, we're you guys, so you listeners, you're gonna get know when we get to the ones where it's like, this cannot be true. There's no way this madness could be true. So I think maybe we can kind of like grade these as we go through them
Oh, good
on the
call.
veracity of how true we think these are, because some of them I think are probably on point. There are one or two in particular that I would be surprised if they didn't happen. Others, it's like there's they would really have to have, you know, really gone off the rails to make these decisions. So yeah, that's the gist. That's what
I
I
like it.
think. Um, so shall we get into it? You
Let's do it.
ready?
What is
Okay.
absolutely going to happen in the Rings of Power season 2, according to partially verified rumors coming out of 4chan?
Yeah, yeah. So the first and probably most important thing in this rumor, and I don't know if this is something that the OneRing.net had already confirmed as well, although they did say it seems like this is something that's being discussed openly at
Mm-hmm.
Amazon, and that is that Amazon has secretly acquired the rights to use material from the Silmarillion in the Rings of Power season 2. So the Silmarillion, obviously being Tolkien's
Obviously.
book, which covers the first and second ages, which Amazon did not have the rights to use material from, which put them in a weird catch-22, where they could use Lord of the Rings stuff, they could use the appendices primarily, but they could not use the actual stuff from the actual book that covered this time period. Um, so this obviously is a huge game changer. The Silmarillion has never been, the rights have never been given out by the Tolkien estate. So if this is true, it's a big deal. Um, what do you think on this one, Dan? Do you think this is true? Do you think this is madness?
I'm gonna say false. And my
Yeah?
reasoning
Why?
being, why would they only get it now? Like, if you're Amazon and you have all your billions, why would you have waited until after you made the first season of a multi-season Lord of the Rings show to do this? Like, you've
So
already locked yourself into the story about an age that's not mostly covered in that. It just feels weird.
yeah.
Also, I wonder if it's possible to do a deal of this magnitude and keep it secret in this day and age. So I'm gonna guess false.
Yes. Yeah, this is one of those things where it's like, if it's true, why wouldn't Amazon be shouting this from the rooftops?
Sure.
Because it is a huge deal, and it would probably give people, some confidence, maybe a little more confidence to know that they have these rights. I think so. Here is the imagined scenario I have in my head of why they might
Hmm.
have gotten them now. I imagine if Amazon got rights for the Silmarillion now, it wasn't like they just decided they needed them now. It was maybe the Tolkien estate finally decided to give them to them now.
Okay.
And the way I could see that happening, and I don't know very much about the Tolkien estate, this could be totally off. But if Amazon was
Interesting.
able to come back to them and be like, here's this show we started, it's doing, in our opinion, pretty well. We have ideas for season 2 that we think we need bits of the Silmarillion to pull off. And we're going to get into this in a second because there's a specific scene from the Silmarillion that was in this report. And you know, would you maybe let us do that? Give us the rights just enough that we could do these scenes we want to do. Because the OneRing.net did note this is most likely, if it's true, a one-off thing. It's not like Amazon can just do a Silmarillion, Beren and Luthien show. It's like they got the rights to use Silmarillion material in this season, is kind of the way they framed it. But yeah, it's questionable at best.
What a good racket to
Um,
be in, to just be able to sell off tiny bits of permission for the tune of millions of dollars. Like, give me
yeah.
$1 million and you can talk about this elf. Oh, business. Okay, what else is on the rumor
Yeah.
list?
So kind of related to that, we're gonna see I need to give a spoiler warning here. This is all
Okay.
unsubstantiated. It could all be nonsense, but if you care about spoilers, be aware we're gonna talk wild speculation about season 2. We're going to see Sauron's backstory in season 2. And this is where the Silmarillion stuff comes into play. Apparently, the first episode is going to be fairly self-contained about Sauron's backstory. And it's going to start with the scene where Eru, or Iluvatar, that's God basically in Tolkien lands, made the Valar and Maiar. So there's this scene at the beginning of the Silmarillion where they sing everything into existence. The report
Like you do.
says season 2 is going to start with that. Um, Opinions on this? Because you're more
That's
familiar with the Silmarillion than I am.
Yeah, I always thought it was Eru Iluvatar, but
You're
I'm not
probably
a
right.
Tolkien scholar. It would make I mean, this is something that you should see if you're making a Rings of Power show, Lord of the Rings show about the prehistory
Totally.
of Lord of the Rings. Yeah, Sauron's backstory makes sense to cover. He's like an angelic being, as is Gandalf, as our other folk who were sung into existence by God in the long, long ago, in the formless void. It'd be cool.
Yes.
I'd like to see it. I think it's a good idea.
Same.
Yeah, if they could do it, this makes more sense. And maybe you're right. Perhaps they did buy bits of the rights to the Silmarillion piecemeal, which does sound crazy to me. I want to be in charge of that. And do it. So I'll go ahead and rate this one as the ring of accuracy.
Ooh, okay, okay. So kind of related to this, this is the flip side of that, where it's like, hey, that sounds kind of reasonable. Here's the unreasonable side of
Okay.
the whole Sauron backstory thing. Apparently, Sauron, so
Apparently.
you remember Adar, the elf played by Game of Thrones
Yeah,
veteran
sure.
Joseph Mawley.
Evil elf
Um,
man.
so evil elf man, he has a grudge against Sauron,
Yeah.
and it has been said that where that grudge stemmed from is that Sauron had a son
Oh.
whom Adar murdered in cold blood. And that's why there's that line in episode 6 of the first season where Halbrand, before you know he's Sauron, he's got Adar at spear point, and Adar's like, "Did I hurt someone close to you? A woman? Perhaps a child?" And there's a dramatic pause. So I guess Sauron's a daddy. How do we feel about that?
How awful. I mean, I think it sounds like the kind of bad decision a writer would make. So I can believe this is true. I don't like it though.
Oof.
Um, the idea of the Lord of the Rings mythology that Tolkien created is one of the more sacrosanct world building compendiums in
Yes.
fantasy. Like it's not like you're just kind of yes anding your way into making a new magic system for your fantasy book. Like this stuff has been around for decades. It matters to people. It's been studied in a scholarly way. And for you to add like Sarah, a kid now, like that feels disrespectful and stupid to me. And like changing
Yeah.
something that has a rich history and should be respected for the sake of like fridging a kid and giving your TV protagonist motivation. I don't like it. Now, okay, I don't like it. I can believe
Yeah.
they do it though. Like this, I'll say, this sounds like the kind of bad decision a hack TV writer would make. So I think this one sounds true, but I do not like it.
God, insane. Yeah, I agree with you. This sounds plausible, like someone could have made this decision. But I also wholeheartedly agree that it's a terrible decision, if true. Because like you said, like this is storied lore. It's not, Sauron's kind of like the original Dark Lord of fantasy stuff. Making him just suddenly a dad with, who's misunderstood because his kid died. Like that's just a really
Oh,
weird decision, especially because Tolkien's mythology is so, I'm gonna say religious. Let's just say religious. I think he's better about coding it than C.S. Lewis was, but he also was pretty
sure.
explicit about some of those themes working in, and that is especially true for this period of like the Silmarillion lore, like the Eru, creating the Maiar and Valar. They're basically angels and
Hmm.
lesser angels. So to then be like this lesser angel just like had a kid, that'd be kind of like, you know, I'm struggling to think
Editing
of
the
a good
Bible.
example. If you just found out Gandalf had a kid somewhere, yeah, almost like editing the Bible a little bit. So it feels like a questionable decision, but like you said, one I could see someone making, especially
Cool.
given how season one went.
We'll brace for
This
that.
next one though, brace for Daddy Sauron. He's real sad. Let us know in the chat how you feel about Daddy Sauron. Hey Fantasy Fan says, I heard these rumors on the YouTube channel Nerd of the Rings. Who knows what's true? Fun guessing though. Yes,
Exactly.
totally agree.
Cool.
This next one, I will, if this is true, the show is doomed. That's my opinion on this next one, which is that. So Dan, you remember Tom Bombadil, right?
From the books. He didn't appear in the movies. He's a merry, happy-go-lucky, boot and galoshes wearing forest spirit thing who can do anything and be anywhere, but prefers to just sing jolly, happy songs about his river wife.
Yes, as forest spirit thing guys do.
They cut him from
Yeah, so
most
Tom
adaptations because
Bombadil.
he's just like, why are you here?
Yeah, he Frodo and Sam just kind of stop off and stay with him for a bit at the beginning of the
Hmm.
Fellowship of the Ring, and then they go on their way, and he's never really mentioned again. His wife Goldberry, or his love, I don't think it's technically his wife.
Oh, good point.
So the report says that Tom Bombadil and Goldberry will appear in
Uh-huh.
season two, which on the surface I'm like, ooh, that's I wouldn't hate. He's an immortal forest spirit guy. I don't hate the idea of him being around during this time. The thing that is sketch about this is
Mhm.
that so during the Eru singing everyone into existence scene, we're supposedly going to see Melkor or
Oh,
Morgoth, the original Dark Lord. So we'll see an actor play that part. What the rumor says is that Tom Bombadil will be played by that same actor, and and Goldberry will be played by the same actor who played Ungoliant. Ungoliant being the giant spider, primal spider who birthed Shelob and was an ally of Morgoth's in the First Age. So they were reborn as Tom Bombadil and Goldberry and are serving a penance uh, set out for them by Mandos, who I assume is Eru or one of the Valar. Correct
yeah,
me
he
because you
is.
probably know and I don't.
He's one of
So
Melkor's colleagues.
yeah, okay. So this sounds insane. There's no way, right?
No,
Like there's
no,
no way.
there's no. This had better freaking be false. That's just
Yeah,
stupidity on a level that I don't even think the hackiest of writer would really contemplate. Why? To what end?
yeah.
So,
Agree. To
let's just
what
hope it's not
end?
true and move on. Be funny. Be very, very
Yeah,
funny though.
agree. Yeah, it would. It'd be funny in a this is now a good bad show type of way. And maybe also tellingly, the leak for this said the long held fan theory that Tom Bombadil is Morgoth, and like I've never met anyone who's ever heard of that fan theory, so I
No.
think they were just trolling with that one. But here's one that's a little more plausible, because they set it up in season one. So another part of these rumors are that Galadriel's husband, Celeborn, or Celeborn. I'm sure I'm saying all these names
I think
wrong.
it's
Don't come
Celeborn. I
at me,
believe they
Tolkien
have the
scholars.
hard Irish
Okay,
C's, like Kyrian
sweet.
and stuff
So
like that.
yeah, okay, Celeborn. So Celeborn, Galadriel mentioned him in season one. That's her husband. She thinks he's dead. We've all seen Lord of the Rings. Galadriel's husband is not dead. So the rumor is that Sauron will pretend to be him to trick the elves because Sauron is a shapeshifter. We didn't really
Hmm.
see that in season one. We're going to see multiple actors play Sauron in season two. Is That's a wider rumor than this. So that was something that was already, people were already talking about various actors playing him before these rumors came out. So Sauron will trick people by pretending to be Celeborn.
That's the one.
Too many C names. That's the one. And then in the season two finale, Galadriel and the real Celeborn will actually be reunited. Thoughts on this one?
Dumb. I mean, this again sounds like plausible bad decision though. I mean, that just kind of repeats the first season where you think Sauron's someone else for the entire season and turns out to be Sauron at the end. Like they do it again. Also, what's so wrong with just following the book where he appears as a beautiful angelic being who helps out the elves? You don't have to add in like a soap opera, my dead husband is back from the dead plot into that. Um, and again, it's repetitive. So I can believe it could happen, but I don't like it. True, but
Yeah, I
bad.
agree. True but bad. I kind of agree with that because it makes sense, and they set it up in season one.
Hmm.
Because that the mention of Celeborn in season one already made me be like, "What are we doing here?" Because there's never a point in the books where it's assumed Celeborn is dead by Galadriel, and
Hmm.
there was just no setup. She just kind of casually dropped this bit of information at one point in the show, and then he's never mentioned again. Um, so they clearly have some sort of plan for him. Um, and you know, speaking of maybe bad TV decisions, I could see something where, because don't forget, Galadriel is the only one who knows Sauron's identity at this point in the Rings of Power. So I could see him coming back and like blackmailing her to be in with the elves because she's technically keeping the secret that Sauron helped the elves make the Rings of Power for some reason. She didn't tell anyone that. Um, so maybe
We
he'll
are
come
really
back and then they can get the romantic tension between Sauron and Galadriel for a second season in a row as he blackmails her.
we are really talking ourselves into not liking this show, aren't we? I didn't mean to be this down on it. Just now that I'm talking about these possibilities, I'm like, I don't want to watch any of this.
Okay, well, here's one that I do want to watch.
Okay.
So this is a spoiler, and this I think of everything in the leaks. This is the most likely to pan out, and that is that Celebrimbor, that's the elf who made the rings with
Hmm.
Sauron at the end of season one. He will get his head lopped off late in the season, Ned Stark style.
Hmm.
Um, and that will happen during probably episode 7 or 8, which we have. So this is not even speculation. The director of episode 7 has said it is a huge battle episode,
Right.
and we're basically expecting to see the sacking of a Region is kind of like what the leading fan theory is. So Sauron and Adar bringing their dark forces to a Region, which is like the region the elves primarily live on Middle Earth, and destroying it. And
Um,
Celebrimbor, correct me if I'm wrong, he does die in the book, so this would
he
be
does, yeah.
accurate, right?
Yeah, I mean,
Okay. So
he
what
doesn't
do
get
you
his
think?
head lopped off, but it's more accurate than most of what they do. So sure, I'll give this one a
Yeah.
pass.
Yeah, I'll give this one a pass too. Like I said, of everything in this, that's the one I think the most will pan out. And then the very last one to just touch on briefly. Uh, so the stranger that is the beardy guy who is most likely Gandalf. This like outright refers to him by Gandalf's other names like Mithrandir and stuff like that. Apparently, we'll see how Gandalf meets Shadowfax and some stuff about the Great Line of Horses in season 2. What's your opinion on this one, Dan?
Is Shadowfax 3,000 years old?
No. No. Well, so what I read, and again, I'm not super well versed in the lore, is that this line of horses isn't even around during the Second Age. So whatever they do, maybe he's an immortal horse. That's why he's so fast. He's had thousands of years to train.
I'm fine with them going into the line of horses. I don't want Shadowfax to have been one of the immortals.
Okay, that's fair. I think I can get behind that. Um, so that's the gist with the Lord of the Rings news. Let's close this. Fantasy Fan said something interesting that I want to touch on here as we move on. So
Mhm.
they said, I think we're all into this rumor news because we're patiently waiting for real news to come out for the show. And I agree with that because
Good
so
point.
one of the other things that the OneRing.net pointed out is that the official Rings of Power Twitter, I don't think has posted since like July of last year, maybe.
Never
So
understand that.
like this is kind of the opposite tack that Amazon took with season 1, where they had announced a release date like 2 years ahead of time, and like, you know, they put out all those posters eventually and stuff like that. Like, we don't know anything about when we should actually expect the Rings of Power season 2. Apparently there was um Amazon has taken it off of its like for your consideration Emmy site. So there are like signs that they are kind of dragging their feet with the marketing for this. So yeah, Fantasy Fan, it has been a long time since we've had any real official word from the show. Um, what are your thoughts on that, Dan? Do you think that's like cause to be worried? Do you think the show could get pushed back to 2025?
Yeah, possibly. It has been eerily quiet because, House of the Dragon before
Yeah.
it and the Rings of Power went head to head. And we've already had a full trailer for House of the Dragon season 2. We've had teasers, we've had
Yeah.
photos. They're getting the word out, and it's been weirdly quiet. We know they've been done filming for a long time, so we know there's something to show.
Yeah.
I don't know. I I mean, it was always inevitable that they would rethink some of these big expenditures. Now that the
Yeah.
streaming wars are kind of entering a new phase where studios are being more careful about what they spend tons of money on. And Amazon has
Mhm.
made some stupid investments. Citadel comes immediately to mind, that big, expensive spy show that I think cost even more than the Rings of Power, that like I think me and maybe four
Really?
people watched. The Rings of
How could
Power
that cost
also,
more than the Wow,
that's what I read.
that's
I
crazy.
don't know. I don't know. If Leonardo DiCaprio got $100 million in salary, I don't know. So it's odd. It's worth noting, and it
Yeah.
might well get pushed back. Maybe they want to retool it or something. Maybe because they made Tom Bombadil into Morgoth, and now they think it's a bad idea.
Yeah, I mean, I still, wonder if I almost wonder if we could see the releases flipped and see Wheel of Time season 3 come out ahead of
That would
Rings of
be hot.
Power. Because I think Wheel of Time is in an interesting position where if they followed up relatively quickly with a third season, and that third season is adapting the fourth book, The Shadow Rising, which is like widely considered one of the best ones, uh,
Hmm.
um, that show could really take off. Amazon, maybe invest a few more dollars in your fantasy redheaded stepchild show, The Wheel of Time, because we like
Honestly,
it.
if we can just be honest, the Wheel of Time was all they needed in the first place. They didn't need to make this Lord of the Rings show. But it's here, and I will happily
Yes.
watch it when it comes along.
Agree on all counts. So yeah, that's the gist with the Lord of the Rings. Next thing we have to talk about is there was some controversy in the fantasy and science fiction book world this past week. So the Hugo Awards, which are basically like the one of the most prestigious awards that fantasy and sci-fi books can get. They're given out at this convention called Worldcon that basically moves from city to city every year. Each year places bid to hold Worldcon in their city. And then if they win the bid, they're then responsible for running Worldcon that year and facilitating the Hugo Awards. So the controversy, this is a very complicated thing. We wrote about it on the site, winteriscoming.net, if you want to read a more thorough breakdown of it. But the overall gist is that this year the awards took place, or last year, the awards took place in Chengdu, China. It's the first time they've ever been held in China. And there were some concerns about one, like people were protesting a little bit because of how the Chinese government is treating the Uyghur population over there. But also there were concerns about how the Chinese government's very strict like censorship laws could apply to something like Worldcon, which is, you know, celebrating fiction that's like pushing boundaries and stuff like that.
Sure.
And lo and behold, the nomination data for the Hugo Awards was released this past weekend, and it showed some major discrepancies and weirdnesses and basically confirmed those fears that people had. So the biggest example from this is that some works and authors were mysteriously deemed ineligible after it was shown that they had enough nominations to be like finalists. And rather than explain exactly what happened, the person who is kind of the main point of contact for the Hugo committee, Dave McCarty, has been stonewalling and basically has been falling back on this answer that just says, after reviewing the Constitution and the rules we must follow, the administration team determined those works/persons were not eligible. To the degree that even people like Neil Gaiman cannot get an answer from this person about why these works were deemed ineligible without explanation, without being contacted. Nothing. Dan, do you have any thoughts on this before I dive into the specifics?
Those weren't the specifics. No, I think
well, I just wanted to
I'll
mention
let
one
you
or
finish.
two of the specific works.
I think it's
Okay.
interesting. I think Worldcon has been a big deal. I mean, for decades. George R. R. Martin often talks about Worldcon.
Yeah,
He likes to go.
sure.
They've had a few scandals over the years. There was sort of a Gamergate-esque blow up back, I think around Gamergate times, like 2015 or so, where there was like a
Yes.
faction of Worldcon voters who tried to make sure that the more woke stories didn't get nominated, and that got resolved. But these nerds just can't stop getting into trouble.
Yeah, so that last scandal you were talking about, that was the sad and the rabid puppies. And yeah,
It
that was
is.
around 2015 to 2017, I think. Um, and that was like slate voting. Like they had their slate, they were basically saying all the woke books are getting appreciated and our books are not. So we need to change that because clearly something's amiss. But this is even more I think concerning and like bigger of an issue. So
Okay.
just to touch on a few of the works really quick. So Babel by R.F. Kuang was deemed ineligible for best novel, and this was the big one because everyone
Okay.
in this community expected this to be in the running because it won a bunch of other major awards this year. R.F. Kuang is the highly acclaimed author. She wrote The Poppy War. And Babel was just it received the third most nominations of any book and was ineligible without explanation. And interestingly, this is a book that deals with social upheaval and colonialism and stuff like that. So it's being speculated basically that a lot of the works that were deemed ineligible have to do with trying to appease the Chinese censorship laws. And
Mhm.
the people connected to this have said, you know, we weren't pressured by the government, basically.
Of course.
But they stopped short of saying we did not take any preemptive steps to avoid upsetting them. Um, the other really notable ones, so Jiren J. Zhao, which is the author of Iron Widow, was similarly deemed ineligible for the Astounding Award, which is the award for new authors.
Hmm.
And she is on their website explicitly as being eligible this year for that award. Um, and then probably the other biggest one is The Sandman, which was nominated for its sixth episode, The Sound of Her Wings.
Great episode.
And that was cut from the best dramatic presentation short form category. Um, and Neil Gaiman was unhappy about this, pretty understandably. We all liked The Sandman here, so it's sad to see that it was up for an award and was canned for no explained reason. He has been kind of in the trenches, being like, "Can you tell me specifically why this was disqualified?" And for him, it's
God
not
bless
even
him.
about he wants awards. Like he emphasized that an award for this show would be an award for all the people who worked on the show, basically.
Sure.
And yeah, he couldn't get an answer. The person fell back on that same response we read earlier. Um, so Neil Gaiman said, this was on Facebook, this was happening, that this seems even more concerning than the sad and rabid puppy stuff, because at least then Worldcon was transparent about how they were trying to fix this and what the issues were. And
Hmm.
here there are some very obvious instances that something is amiss and no one's talking about it. There was also some issues with the data. There was an odd cliff in the data that is very abnormal compared to previous years. There were some instances where the number of nominations exceeded the number of ballots cast. So, like, those sorts of things where it looks like books may have been cooked. Um, but yeah, that is the very broad overview of what happens. This part of the issue is that there's no organizational overview for the Hugo Awards and Worldcon. It's like once a city wins the bid, they basically have all the responsibility for just how to run all of it. They have a constitution from the WSFS, which is the World Science Fiction Society, that they are kind
Yes.
of like expected to abide by, but there's no way to enforce that. So
More like
here's
guidelines.
an example where yeah, they basically caved to local laws, it looks like. And that is something that the Hugo Awards and Worldcon now has to really consider when they are picking what cities to go to in the future. Because there are other countries that have strict laws, like with LGBTQ plus people
Sure.
and literature. Like Uganda is up for the bid in 2028. John Scalzi talked about this on his blog, and they have some very strict laws. And if they put pressure on the Hugo Awards, if they were held there, there's really nothing that could be done about it. And that's kind of what it seems like happened here. So, yeah, that's the gist.
It's really interesting. I have a question and I have a comment. I'll do my question first.
Okay.
Uh, so if the kind of purported reason people are raising as to why some of these stories that, if I understand it, should have been
Mhm.
on the nomination list, but for some kind of zaniness, like the
Mhm.
book you mentioned or the gaming episode. So if the explanation for
Yeah.
why those aren't on there is because the Hugos were preemptively kind of excluding them for fear of enraging Chinese censors, what's the proffered reason for excluding the Sandman episode? Because I love that episode. That's episode 6. That's where Sandman meets his bestie
Yeah.
and then walks around with sister Death. Like I can understand maybe looking at a book like Babel, was it called? And
Yeah.
thinking like, okay, this is about down with authoritarianism. Chinese government could be considered an authoritarian government. Maybe they won't like that, so we'll say no. But like, what in the Sandman episode was supposed to be? Does anyone have an explanation for why that would be excluded?
No. No.
Okay.
So what you are saying right now, Neil Gaiman basically said exactly what you just said to this person who's, again, the main point of contact, the only one answering the emails and comments about why this happened, who helped put the data together, this guy, Dave McCarty. Gaiman said exactly what you just said. Like, what was it about this episode of The Sandman? Was it, that there were diverse characters? Was it its view
Mhm.
on death? Like, did that offend or something like that?
Was
And
it the dead
the
baby?
person basically, was it? We don't know. They didn't answer. They fell back on that exact copy paste answer that I read earlier, which was after reviewing the rules we must follow, the administration team determined it was not eligible. And they just keep repeating that, no matter how the
Uh-huh.
questions are phrased. And if even Neil Gaiman can't get an answer, and he's been involved in these awards in some capacity for like almost 40 years, which is just like kind of wildly disrespectful, in my opinion, that he asks this and is being kind of just like shunted aside, like, I don't need to answer you on this. But yeah, that's part of what makes this so confusing, because there are things like that Sandman episode that were, it's not really clear what caused it to be disqualified. You can't even infer. Like with Babel, like you said, we can make some inferences. The author as
Hmm.
well, basically in her response, said she assumes this was a matter of undesirability, as in political
Hmm.
undesirability, rather than that it actually was not eligible. Um, so yeah, until someone it the way this comes off is that there's either a situation where they basically, that it seems like they're afraid to explain exactly what happened, or they don't feel that like
Hmm.
their colleagues in China maybe are safe enough to explain explicitly what happened. And it's hard because
Sure.
right now all we have is speculation, but unless they say things clearly, like that's all we have. So
Right.
does
Right.
that answer does that
Yeah,
answer
it
your
does.
question?
I mean, it does. I mean, the answer basically is, and we don't know. And
Yeah.
I don't talk, I don't want to talk too much about it because we're running low on time. But just to confirm really
Hmm.
quick, like, so those things should have been nominated because I don't really get the voting process, and I don't need to understand the voting process in a short time. But like, these things should have been
Sure.
nominated, and the only reason they wouldn't be is because someone put their thumb on the scale, right?
Yes. So they were nominated. So that's why
Oh,
it's
cool.
so confusing, because the data that came out shows what people nominated. The nominations come from the membership of the con. They all
Hmm.
cast their votes for what they want to see on the ballot, and then however many top ones go on the ballot. And basically, the data showed that books like Babel or Jiren J. Zhao as
Hmm.
the author, or uh, Paul Weimer, who's was up for best fan writer, they all would have been finalists in their
Gotcha.
categories, and then they were deemed ineligible. So they got the
Okay.
votes
Okay.
to
I'm there with you.
to be finalists. So that's why it's such an issue. It is
It's very
clear
interesting
that someone
of,
put their thumb on a scale.
because like people in the community, authors and people who run these kind of organizations want to be multicultural and embrace other parts of the world. But
Yeah.
yeah, the reality is if you go to a country that has incredibly strict laws about, for example, LGBTQIA plus behavior, you could put authors in danger. You might not want to, because I know that a lot of stories in at Worldcon are about social issues these days. So you might
Yeah.
exclude, for example, stories that are about injustices suffered by gay people, uh,
Absolutely. Yeah.
or be inclined not to nominate them. But you also want to expand the reach of the awards and be seen to be embracing other cultures. But what if the other cultures are bigoted? It is a difficult situation, and it
Yeah.
sounds like they're in a dilly of a pickle.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head, I think. And this is really the first time that the convention has really had to deal with this in this explicit of a manner.
Hmm.
I was at the one where this convention won its bid, basically. It was like a few years ago. And what you just said was like one of the main arguments for why it would be great that it would be over there, so that Worldcon isn't just in Western countries. It's a
Sure.
convention that goes everywhere in the world. But yeah, this is a bit of, they have to also consider the realities of what that might entail for people. Um, so yeah, that's the gist. If you want more information
Ooh.
about that, go read the article on the site that's a little more detailed. Um, but let's move on to happier times. and talk very
Yeah.
briefly. What are you watching, Dan? And what are
Yeah,
all
quickly,
you
let's
watching?
hit what we're doing. Same stuff. I'm watching Percy Jackson. I think it's fine. The show is very darkly photographed. It's fine. It's nice. It's good. It's pleasant. It's fine. I love reading the Reddit comments because they hate it. People over there in the Percy Jackson subreddit, they
Hmm,
hate this show. It's consistent. I thought the most recent one was pretty good. One of the better ones. It's been
I
nice.
enjoyed it.
I'm not sure that show is going well. Apparently, it's gotten decent ratings, but I'm not sure it's going to make a big cultural impact. It feels like it's been a little too mild in reception and a little too split, but it's been nice. I like it. I'll watch the finale. I'm watching True Detective Night Country with Jodie Foster and Callie Rice.
Nice.
That's been fun because Jodie Foster is a celebrated actress. She was in Signs of the Lambs. And now they're in Alaska and it's dark and it's spooky and there's a big clump of dead frozen scientists. And it's fun to figure out who killed
Ew.
them. And the
Yeah,
previous True Detective creator like badmouthed the new show, the new season. He's not involved. That's
I
pretty funny.
saw.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yep. Throwing shade on Instagram.
How about you, Daniel? What are you
That's cool.
watching?
I'm glad that. So I've been watching this show called Slow Horses, which is on Apple TV Plus. It
Oh, I hear
stars
that's
Gary
great.
Oldman as kind of. It's great. Yeah, it's a spy thriller type of show about kind of internal politics in MI5. Gary Oldman is like this kind of washed up. He kind of runs this division, the Slow Horses, that's like where spies go when they're put out to pasture. They end up in his
Hmm.
squad, and he's like this alcoholic, farts a lot
Of
on
course.
screen. The amount of farts Gary Oldman does in that show is like a running joke of the show. But he's amazing. So that's been really good. And aside from that, the other thing I just watched that I loved is The Creator, which is a sci-fi movie directed by Gareth
That looked
Edwards, the guy
cool.
who directed Rogue One. It was really cool. It's a heavy movie. I think especially with what's going on in Palestine right now, that watching The Creator hits different because it is all about kind of this war between the United States and AI, basically. And it's specifically the United States, like going to New Asia, which has a more integrated view toward AI people.
Gotcha.
And a lot of places get very shockingly bombed. So it's a very heavy, thought-provoking movie. But honestly, what we were talking about earlier about the streaming services with like franchises like the Game of Thrones universe and whatever, it was almost shocking, like a system
Hmm.
shock to me to turn this on and be like, oh, this is just an original story. It's not based on anything. It's just
So
an
cool.
original story that's really good with really good actors and effects. So yeah, I would definitely recommend it. It's on Hulu right now.
I remember seeing the previews for that and being like, that looks really cool. And then I'm part of the problem because I
Yeah,
fully didn't go. And it fully just sort of kind of
same.
came out and then shut down. But I remember thinking like that looks interesting. I I should
Yeah,
support non-franchise tentpole movies. We all should. We all should.
we
Getting
all
some
should.
we all
Yeah,
should. Some commenters saying that they're none of them are really loving Percy Jackson. They're kind of giving up halfway through. Yeah, it's I don't blame you. It's fine. Let's see what else.
yeah,
Nicole liked the concept in the creator, but thought the execution of them could have been a bit better. Which, yeah, I can see that. Although, man, I do give anything like that just points for novelty nowadays. Because you're right. I mean, even if
yeah.
it's not like maybe fully acted on everything it tries to do, at least something different, at least in another Star Wars movie. I'll try and see that one
Yeah.
sometime because I thought it looked cool, but I did not
It's
actually watch it.
Yeah, if you've got Hulu, it's worth the couple
Hulu.
of hours. And also they made it on a budget of like 80 million. It looks great. It's got great like really striking special effects. I do agree a little bit about the whoever said so
Nicole.
Nicole, the execution of it could have been a little better. It is a heavy movie all the way through, so there's like tonally there's not a whole lot of variety. Like it can
Hmm.
feel a little dour by the end. But I, like you said, the novelty of just seeing an original movie with like really great acting. Like at one point I was like, what am I watching, an HBO genre show? Like the acting in this is great. And I'm so used to, like, if it's sci-fi or fantasy in the movies, having it be like kind of Marvel tier acting, which is still really
Yeah.
good, but that's different than like, like someone's clearly putting their soul on the screen, and that came across in this movie, I think, with a few of the
Right.
actors.
Where's
Um,
my pop
so
culture
yeah,
quip? No one's made a pop culture quip in a few minutes. Come on, get on this, the creator.
right?
Sounds cool. Should we wrap this puppy
Yeah,
up with a WiC News Lightning Round?
let's do it. So time for the world famous lightning round, where we go through all of the news stories we didn't have time to get to in the main show, with 20 seconds. Otherwise, we are buzzed into shame and infamy by producer Richard. Dan, you are going to go first this time. Yeah, that's the sound. You ready to begin the lightning round?
Yes.
Okay. Yes. So Avatar, The Last Airbender, the live action remake on Netflix, it dropped another trailer. What did you think of it, Dan?
I liked it. I'm looking forward to this thing. I love the original show. I think it's a great series after The Last Airbender. The live action remake looks like they're walking that line where they're faithful to it. Everything looks kind of one to one, but they have enough of an idea of where to separate that it could be a good kind of melding of the two styles. I hope it's
Yeah.
good. It's coming soon. I'll be watching. Hey Daniel, here's something about
Yes.
The Witcher. There was a leaked audition tape for The Witcher season 4 that indicated there's going to be some kind of meta shared universe storyline in the next season, and work has already begun on the fifth and purportedly final season.
Yeah, a lot going on in Witcherville right now. So the thing with the meta storyline is this audition tape confirmed a character named Nimue, who you might recognize the name from Arthurian legends, is going to be in this season. And she is in the book this season is based on, so that's all accurate, but it does confirm they're going to get into multi-world shenanigans from here on. And yeah, season 5, they're writing it. So speaking of cinematic universes, Deadline says that Max is open to the possibility of developing more than one idea based on Harry Potter. So, what does
Yeah,
that even mean?
of course they are. They want a Harry Potter cinematic universe. They want multiple shows about Harry Potter, about Hermione, the later years. They want, the Weasley sitcom. Like they want it all, I imagine. I don't know how far they're gonna go, but
Oh,
they're making a Harry Potter TV show. It will probably happen, even though they announced it too early. Um, and
yeah,
we'll see where it goes from there, man. It could be wild. Uh, Daniel, here's something close
could
to
be.
your heart. The original screenwriter
Yes.
of Jurassic Park, David Coep, is returning to write a new Jurassic World movie. Could come as early as 2025. Will you be there to see the first Velociraptor on the space station?
I mean, of course I'm gonna see it. I've seen all of these movies. I do love Jurassic Park, and I enjoy the Jurassic World movies. The eternal milking of this franchise feels a little sad to me because, like, the original Jurassic Park, like Michael Crichton's book, like he had some profound thoughts in there. And at
Yeah.
this point, we're just like, it's just franchise. We need to make more money, put on more dinosaur suits, actors. Yeah. Uh,
The best
but
version of that
this is
is like the sorry, go ahead. You're right. You're right. Go ahead.
oh no, I want to hear the joke, Dan. Tell me the joke.
The best example of the franchise degradation to me is Squid Game being a show about like people desperate for money participating in a like self-immolating game show for the entertainment of billionaires, and they make like a real reality show version of it. That's hysterical. But okay, go on.
That is the gold standard for this as a cultural business
Mhm.
problem. Um, so happier news: Invincible season 2, part 2 has a release
Woo!
date. Uh, yeah, it's premiering on Prime Video on March 14th.
Look, I'm happy. I like this show. I want to see more. what took so long? Why was the season split up? Why are we getting 4 then, 4 now? Something weird went on. Maybe because they're making it like old school animation actually took longer or something. I don't know. Something happened because it just didn't make maybe it was the strikes. I don't know. It's coming back in March. Good. I'll watch it because that show is solid.
Awesome.
Okay.
Ooh, nice.
Daniel, the television show Daredevil Born Again is resuming production. Sounds like a straight up continuation of the Netflix show. The actors who played Foggy, Karen, and Bullseye are all coming back. So's the guy who played the Punisher, as is the stunt coordinator. Good news, bad news?
I think this is great news. Daredevil season 3 was really good, and it left a few really big cliffhangers and did some really good setup, like with Bullseye as a villain. I was sad it got canceled. I think doing an actual continuation of the Netflix Daredevil show instead of like a legal dramedy sitcom with Matt Murdock is just by far the right choice.
Sure.
Plus, all those actors coming back is exciting. Oh, speaking of Squid Game,
Yeah, I brought that too
Netflix
soon.
confirms that Squid Game season 2 is coming out sometime this year.
Cool. We've waited a while. I was the was the first season in 2021 or 2022? I forget.
I think
But
so.
it came out and it was great. I already described what it is. I don't have to do that anymore. We haven't heard a lot about it, but if it's going to come up the next season, this year, I will definitely watch it. Where does it go from here? More children's games, more social commentary that will get misunderstood by Netflix from something else. We'll see.
Yeah,
Okay, Daniel,
probably.
and our final one. A Song of Ice and Fire author George R. R. Martin's minions reveal the artist of the 2025 Song of Ice and Fire calendar, Eddie Mendoza. And here's the cover. Starfall, probably
Yep.
in Dorne.
Yeah, so the Song of Ice and Fire calendars, they're always gorgeous every year. They always have stunningly beautiful artwork. This one has places like Skagos and Karth. So we're getting some places we haven't seen in the calendars before. And yeah, if you like the calendars, the new one's on the way. You can pre-order it now. Looks gorgeous.
And that's our show, everybody. Thanks for sticking with us. I know we went a
Yeah.
little long, but we're just that passionate about talking to you about these things. Thanks for your comments. Loved the comments during the lightning round. Y'all have some great insights. And we will invite you back to join us every Wednesday at 2 p.m. Central Standard Time on the Winter is Coming Facebook page and also the Winter is Coming YouTube page. Also, download us wherever you want to download podcasts, Google Play, iTunes, elsewhere. We're in a little long, so I'm wrapping up quickly, but thanks for watching, everybody. Come back next week. Hang out with us. Good night, good luck, and may the 4th be with you. Why not? Bye.
Take care, all.